Hi guys, welcome or welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to talk about why your photographs might be blurry. So basically, like I've just said, we're going to discuss why your photographs may be blurry, and there are many reasons why this may happen. So we're basically just going to kind of go through all of them as quickly as physically possible. So if you haven't already, please do press the subscribe button and click the bell icon. The bell icon will help you out because it'll give you a notification every single time I upload a video. I upload every week and sometimes more than that if I feel like it and if I have time. So guys, for this particular video, I made a list, and on my list is a number of things that could make your photographs blurry. To get through this list in as quick time as possible with as little boring bits as possible, we're just going to run straight into it. Start with number one. The first reason for having blurry photographs would be because your shutter speed is too low. Now, if you've not already, you might want to go ahead and watch the exposure triangle video, which I will link above. The exposure triangle video will discuss what shutter speed actually does and how to control your settings to freeze action. So the main reason why people's photographs are blurry is usually because the shutter speed is too slow. This will give you a telltale look in your images, and it will just look like things are being stretched and not particularly pretty. That's reason number one. Reason number one, the solution for that would be to just increase your shutter speed. Come onto either shutter priority mode or TV mode on Canon cameras and go ahead and increase the shutter speed to control it in there, or shoot in full manual like we do and follow the exposure triangle video. There is also a video on the channel that is something called how to photograph dogs running or something like that. The second reason that your photographs may be blurry would be because the shutter speed is too slow for you, not for the subject. So that kind of isn't motion blur, that's camera shake. Camera shake essentially is where the subject is stationary and therefore there is no action to freeze there, but you have moved and that movement has created camera shake. It's easy to solve, just increase the shutter speed a little bit. The general rule for avoiding camera shake is to keep your shutter speed at 2 times the focal length of the lens of a second. What I mean by that is if you have a 50mm lens, you want to be at 1/100th of a second, which is 2 times the focal length, 50 to 100, then put of a second after it. Perfect. That's how you do it. So if you've run a 200mm lens, yep, you guessed it, 4/100th of a second will prevent camera shake, unless you're throwing your camera around, in which case you're going to need to be higher than that. That's for sure. The only exception to the camera shake situation is if your lens has image stabilization in it. If your lens has IS or OSS or one of the stabilization acronyms, then you definitely can go slightly lower with your shutter speed to make sure it's safe. In fact, you can usually go to the whatever the focal length is of a second. So if you're using a 200mm lens with image stabilization, you can shoot at 1/200th of a second, usually with relative safety. In fact, I have been known on occasion for international award entries to be shooting at 1/150th of a second and even 1/125th of a second for award things on a 200mm lens. So yeah, you're safe, it's okay, but the subject must obviously be completely stationary, and you should also anchor yourself on an object within the environment. For example, a tree, a rock, a log, or some other solid thing in the area. Also the ground. The ground can work quite well too. Reason number 3 why your photographs may be blurry comes down to lens issues. So you can calibrate lenses. Lenses can be calibrated using particular tools, and you can input the adjustment for the lens for your camera body. And to do that, basically you just want to go ahead and look at the manufacturer's guidelines for how to calibrate your lenses. Calibrating lenses isn't really that difficult, but it does take a little bit of time and effort. Your lens may be causing the blur if it is front focusing or back focusing. So front focusing means that the focus point is consistently grabbing in front of where you want it to. So if this is the dog's eye and consistently the nose is in focus, as in the little bits of hair in front of the eyes are always in focus. When you know you focus on the eye, that lens is therefore front focusing. If the forehead of the dog behind the eye is in focus consistently, but not the eye, the lens is back focusing. So there is an issue there with the lens. It's not usually a massive problem. You can also send your lenses off for servicing. That is an option. Just send your camera body too. They both need to go together. The next set of issues come down to focus issues. So that is kind of user error, but not user error. Basically, something is going on within the camera and the lens that means that the focus is not going on the right place. So there's loads of different options for this. The first option is that you have got your lens or your camera set to manual focus. You would not believe how common this is. Everybody does it, genuinely. So if you've got your camera or your lens on manual focus, of course your photographs will be blurry because there's no autofocus in play here. So unless you are very carefully manually focusing the lens, you're going to end up with blurry pictures. That's just a fact. The next one is that you've got the wrong focus mode on. So maybe you are photographing a dog running towards you, and in that situation, maybe you have got AFS on, not AFC, or you're using single shot and not AI servo on Canon cameras. So in that situation, basically your camera is focusing once when you press the button, but not continually. And therefore only the first one is in focus because everything after that, you held your finger down, but the camera didn't refocus. So you just need to make sure that you are on the correct focus mode. The next reason that your photographs may be blurry is if you're using the wrong focus area or you're not controlling the focus area enough. So that comes down to whether you're using the wide area mode, whether you're using a 9 focus point method that kind of focuses on a group and then moves it, whether you're using the autofocus mode. So basically what that does is the camera picks what you want to focus on and then it tracks it, but that's not always accurate. And then the next option for you would be your spot focuses. So there's loads of different methods for spot focusing too, and you will have blurry pictures if you have not moved them onto the subject. So if your focus point is over to one side, but you're actually focusing on somewhere else, then you are going to have a big problem and the image is going to be blurry, where the subject should be sharp. So the next issue that most people do come into contact with at some point is light issues. So your camera will struggle to focus in very low light and also in very harsh backlight. So if there is a very, very bright light coming at the camera lens from behind the subject, then in that situation, the camera will sometimes struggle to acquire focus. That usually happens at sunset and in the morning. If you position your subject directly in front of the sun, then you're going to have an issue there. Another issue would be to do with low light in a studio situation. If you're shooting with a mirrorless camera, especially the Sonys, this is a situation that happens. If you're using back button focus on AFC, so continuous autofocus on the back button, in a studio situation where you're using a very, very small aperture or a very large f number like f14 or f12, something like that, then you will find that your camera consistently struggles to acquire focus. And that's because the lens is in its small position continually for the continuous focus to work, and therefore the lens doesn't breathe properly. So if you switch to using AFS, so a single focus method, you can still have that up on the back button if you want to, but in those situations the lens will correctly breathe to let more light in to acquire focus and then close back off again. So that is a major issue that you may come into and be like, why is my camera so useless in studio? It's not, it's just you need to change the focus settings. That's all. So the next two issues tend to come about when you're photographing in action situations, and you will have these issues if you're shooting with an entry-level camera and an entry-level lens. Tend to happen most of the time. So the first one is if you've got a slow camera. An entry-level camera will usually have relatively poor autofocus technology within it, and therefore usually it will struggle to acquire and hold focus on a moving subject particularly well. Your hit rate will be low. That's just a fact. So the other option, therefore, is if you are having that issues, maybe you've got a slow lens. So an older lens, an older third-party lens usually has quite slow focus issues there, but not always the old ones. For example, the Sigma 105 1.4 lens is the most amazing portrait lens in the world. You can watch all about that. I will link that above. But it is absolutely diabolically useless for anything to do with moving subjects. And if that subject is moving very quickly, you might as well just kind of take the lens off and throw it at a brick wall, because it's not going to get any good pictures from that situation. Unless you manually focus, I guess, which you could do. But what's the point? There's no point. Just change your lens to something faster. So our penultimate reason for having blurry pictures would be that your lens is broken. Like, you know, sometimes you just can't get around the fact that your lens is broke. So somebody I know recently just had consistently soft images, even though they used to get really sharp images, and they thought it was them that was the problem, but it was not. It was the focus motor within the lens. It had gone, it had blown its little mind, and the lens had slowly deteriorated over a number of months. And there was no solution for that. The camera and the lens went in for servicing. They found the lens issue and they said, look, you need to get a replacement lens. We can't fix it. Doesn't fix from this point. So they got a new lens on their insurance. Job is a good one. Absolutely fine. The other option would be if your camera is broken, which has happened before. I used to own a camera, can't really remember exactly what it was, but it was a DSLR, so not a mirrorless, and the mirror moved within the mirror chamber thing, and apart from having issues looking through the viewfinder, there was also issues with focusing. It couldn't acquire solid focus and the camera was therefore dead. At that point you either need to decide, do I give my camera a funeral, a good send-off and a solid wake, or do I repair the camera at cost or claim on my insurance? Whatever you do at that point, that's completely up to you, but try and assess all of the other options first before resulting in a dead camera. Sometimes it is just user error, and therefore just practice a little bit more with your focus, especially if it's of a moving subject, because sometimes your kit is absolutely fine, you just maybe need a little bit more practice. So that's it guys, that is all of my reasons why you may or may not have a blurry photo. Did I miss one? If I did, please do drop it into the comment section below. If you haven't already, please do press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. The bell icon will help you out, it'll give you a notification every single time I upload a video. I upload every week and sometimes more than that if I feel like it and if I have time. Also, mainly the time part, but also if I feel like it. If you haven't already, also please do go ahead and find us on Instagram, because Instagram is just my happy place sometimes. So I post more things there. And of course, I would love to see you all again really, really, really soon.